a more simple format carbon tax as a deficit reduction strategy. And it would be, major polluter oriented. There would be no recycling. Certainly there would be no offset structure to allow protection, cost-effective protection of tropical forests. But something like that, at some point, before we get totally overwhelmed by the deficit and totally overwhelmed by the cost of climate change, might make some good sense. I would say without a price on carbon, nothing is going to be sufficient. Price on carbon is not sufficient in and of itself. You need regulation to rope in the irrational consumer. You need ways of improving, of reducing subsidies to hydrocarbons and a bunch of other things like that that kind of nest in. But without a price on carbon, we're cooked. And so we can't give up, but we're going to have to look for kind of simple, proximate solutions instead of perfectly engineered solutions. And we really haven't tried one yet.
Can I just say one sentence to support Carter's assertion? I think that the carbon market's failure, although yes, the West Coast one is looking quite okay now, is we got to be very careful, I think, about trying to import Wall Street, which is abjectly failing on so many levels. We can't even value our mortgages, for Christ's sakes, right? To try to take that and value wetlands is going to fail, right? I mean, we can't even do our basic stuff. It's a boom-bust methodology, and there are all kinds of perversities and pathologies in our mainstream financial system. So to try to take that and value nature, forget it. It's not going to happen. If so, it'll happen very poorly. So I think the only way that we can make any progress is, as Carter says, to make it extremely simple. And Waxman-Markey, as laudable as it was, we were all big fans of it in principle, was unreadable. It was way too big, and it was written with all kinds of special interests and pathologies, such as very similarly as is the mortgage market. That's not a market. I mean, the government plays a massive role in that, buys all the mortgages which are being underwritten by banks, basically. So it's a myth that the market, as it stands, is going to be the great white horse that's going to save us. We have to go, and here, unfortunately, we have to go probably incrementally in having case studies of simple solutions, which don't take 1,400 pages to write and read. But something that's going to be linear and have a very measurable success in a decent time frame.
Thanks, Peter. Hillary.
I'll just add to that. I think some of there's more than one way of pricing carbon, and I think the conversation in China is just quite interesting regarding a cap and trade approach versus a tax. And actually what they're considering in many cases is a dual approach. But I think for the Chinese in that conversation, the most important part of that has been how do you at a provincial level identify your emissions, create baselines, and then understand essentially the cost to society of emissions. And they've been incredibly successful at really doing that at a provincial level, and that's been one of the biggest outcomes, I think, from the conversation of cap and trade versus carbon tax. And also the incentives that have been created around things like the 1,000 Enterprise Programme and others have actually worked very well in terms of pricing carbon as almost an incentive for reducing your fossil fuel bill. And there's some really great case studies to demonstrate how that's worked at a provincial level.
Great stuff. Well, thanks very much. Great question, Mike. And we have one over here. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you.
I don't need a microphone. Rob, Hannah.
Hi, Rob. Good.
I'm assuming there's other investors in the room. I'm an impact investor, whatever that means. So I want to ask anybody on the panel 3 questions. What do you want us to do as investors that we're not already doing? Or what do you want us to do more of that we're currently doing? What do you want us to stop doing?
Fantastic. Thanks, Rob. Right. Thanks, Carter.
Well, I'm fond of observing that the human brain tends to overgeneralize, and so a lot of impact investors have as a premise that there's a necessary trade-off, that you have to give up some of the economics in order to get some of the societal co-benefits, the collateral benefits. And that is perhaps true in part of the market, but is not true in most of the market in light of the resource inefficiency, say, in the American economy. So I think we need a much more segmented view of it, looking at kind of win-win investments. For example, energy efficiency is a win-win because it pays for itself, it generates unit cost savings, it improves competitiveness. If you look at air conditioning, for example, right now, I believe that Walmart has about 250,000 5-ton air conditioners sitting on their roofs, sucking up energy, and 40% of Walmart's electric bill is for air conditioning. Air conditioning technology is 100 years old, it's crappy, and it uses a lot of energy, and it requires building more of these natural gas energy peaking stations around America. Well, if we could move toward compressionless air conditioning, which cuts energy use by half, you'd even raise Walmart store margins. So that to me is an impact investment. Let's do a highly segmented view of where we can make money, because one thing's for sure, to fix these problems requires capital, and there's not enough social capital, there's not enough government capital to fix most of these problems. So we must draw in private capital that has choices and give that capital a competitive return. The second thing is the tendency to overgeneralize and labeling. Clean tech is not all investing in this field at all. If you look at the environment piece, I'm just looking at the E of the ESG. Clean tech is not the entire thing. Clean tech tends to be technology, betting, rolling dice on science and physics. It's early stage stuff. It's disappointed investors largely because when you roll dice on science and physics, you very often don't win. But if you look at clean tech as one of 4 markets, early stage, then you've got the growth stage where you take valid companies that have retired tech risk to scale, and then you look at mature investing and you separate that out from infrastructure investing. You actually have 4 markets, and because of the arrogance of Silicon Valley, they're now all called clean tech, even though only one of the 4 is clean tech. So impact investing, if it's done on a highly segmented, close to the coalface, looking for economic returns, and frankly also trying to kind of show the way that it does work. We need leaders like you doing tough-minded impact investing. I'm not saying you shouldn't do some of the stuff that requires a trade-off or is basically social investing at all. The other issue, as you know, is the short-term bias, the tendency to apply very high discount rates, and some of the most important investing is actually going to require applying a lower discount rate because it's going to take longer to get to full flower, but the flower will be fuller when it gets there. So I think there's just a lot of generalized, my mother used to say, generalizations are generally too general. And there's just a lot of generalizations going on in this industry that require some really smart up-close look.
I would say briefly, more briefly, our definition in TNC of impact capital is slightly different than Carter's because Carter really operates in the real world. We have the luxury of trying to figure out, is there really that market for the sub-market return type money? So I applaud your initiatives in clean tech and energy efficiency. That's wonderful. We're trying to answer the question: can we show enough people deals which financially return market minus X, but have a different type of impact? And can we get that at scale? And one of our collaborators puts it as in that type of money we're talking about sees financial return as a constraint rather than a principal objective. And I think to your questions, one of the most interesting meetings I had recently was with somebody in Geneva, and he said basically, impact investing is not that different from buying a football club. And so he was European, so he was talking about Manchester United or Arsenal or whatever. And you don't want to lose the capital on that. You buy because you're passionate about it. You want to make a bit of a return. Maybe it's 1%, maybe it's 2%, and you want to get the money back. And so why is only 2% of overall philanthropy that's being deployed in the world going toward the environment? It's thwarted by education, it's thwarted by religion and many other causes. Why is virtually no capital, the trillions which are flowing back and forth, going toward this sort of a mixture of return and philanthropy, this sort of impact space? Why is that? I think it's because to some extent we've screwed up the narrative. We start with saying, well, hey, you'll make less money, and we get all tied up in knots about why it's less and all that, and we don't really talk about the actual impact. Saving the fish stock, or saving the timberland, or saving the. You may think this is too sort of airy-fairy and sort of dreamy, but
I know you.
To cut to your question is, we are now coming to a point where we're trying to populate the pathway from kind of concepts to deals to products by success stories, by forming syndicates of high net worth individuals who care about something, geography or species or idea, and getting 3, 4, 5 people to deploy money over a period of 10, 15 years, make sure it works, make sure it's measurable, and thereby creating success stories and data that could eventually end up being products, being an impact capital, where enough of percentage of deployable capital is happy to generate market minus X, because what it's actually doing is something which it cares about and is well presented, and it's at sufficient scale to make a difference overall.
Thanks, Peter. Any?
Yeah, so I'd just say that, not to tell you what to do or anything, but I would say that, one, we need to structure these projects so that they stand up to private sector scrutiny. That's one thing. We need to talk about return on investment. We need to create that level playing field and be able to compete on it. And I feel that we've done a bad job of separating out impact investment too much from what is just a good project. And the other thing I would say is, I completely agree, that we need to look at impact. We also need to look at needs. Like, there are a lot of old traditional industries that are not very sexy, where there are massive energy efficiency opportunities, whether it's air conditioning in Walmart, whether it's the shipping sector or trucking. Trucking in the US, 50 billion barrels of oil consumption. They have razor thin profit margins, razor thin. So investment in like the simplest, the ICT technologies is impossible for that industry. So how do we go to those kind of industries and help them have those returns on investment that are about 18 months long for an efficiency technology on average in the trucking industry, and help to invest in those projects. So, moving away from just, this is, impactful as well, but to the sectors that really, really need it, that could not get that financing otherwise. And then just, I suppose, the last point I would say is that, there are a lot of really excellent opportunities to aggregate projects up. So we've seen a lot of movement towards crowdsourcing of projects, that type of thing, where we can then actually put deal flow in front of pension funds and others, at a scale that is going to be useful. I think that aggregation is absolutely necessary, because a lot of these projects can be smaller, but the impact, again, can be quite large.
Thanks, Harry. Short comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that first, you must bring to us products that we can invest in. We cannot be the decision makers as to what the good ideas should be. We bring it to us. There is $3 trillion in public employee pension funds. If each of the public pension funds does what we did in New York and allocates 2% of their trust to do this, there's a huge amount of money available. Develop the products, bring it to us, make sure the products are, as we heard, products that are going to give us a rate of return which was commensurate with our risk that we're taking, and then there will be money available for this work. So just do it. Anybody that has any influence on making investments available to public pension funds in a fiducially sound manner, bring it to us. We got $2 billion, we have $1 billion waiting right here in New York City teachers. Give us some ideas if you want to use it.
Well, thanks very much for your questions. Thanks to the great panel. I feel we're off to a really good start here. This feels to me like action. I love that sense. We're looking at solutions. We've got all the right people at the right place, and I'm looking forward to networking with you all after coffee. It's coffee time coming up. Robert's going to send us off. Thanks very much.
Thank you very, very much to the panel.